Welcome to Same Old Song, the weekly lectionary podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm Aaron Zimmerman, your co-host. I'll be joined by Jacob Smith as we break down the Bible passages for the upcoming Sunday. And whether you're in the pulpit or in the pews, we always bring it back to the good news of God's grace for real people like you.
Holy Spirit, since I was a small kid, I tried to take every show me how. I don't know what I'm doing these days. I'm on that road.
Jake, welcome. I first got to get into some numerology. I know you're big into Kabbalah, so it's a big thing for you. It's one of the many traits you share with Madonna. But I want to note two things. This is for the 13th Sunday after Pentecost, 13 being Taylor Swift's favorite number. And it is also our 420th episode, episode 420, which means nothing. That number has no significance culturally or to anyone out there in the zeitgeist. Is that correct?
It's deeply biblical, going back to the book of Genesis 4:20, related to Genesis 1:29, every seed-bearing plant. But anyway...
some of you know what we're talking about, some of you don't. And if you want to know,
this episode is dedicated to Cypress Hill. So anyway.
To just about every single block in New York City. Good Lord. Lots of dispensaries related
That's
to
not
number.
Incense. It's not incense.
It is powerful smell. Well, some people
some would say it is. Yeah.
That's right. Well,
not for me.
Seth
It freaks
Rogen.
me out.
Seth Rogen.
So
do it.
anyway.
We're here. We are for the 13th Sunday after Pentecost, and we will be delving into some readings out of some of the more challenging Romans passages. But that's our second reading for today, Romans 12, 1 through 8. But we'll begin with Isaiah 51, 1 through 6, as we're on track dose. And then
Isaiah.
we'll conclude with Matthew 16,
Do you mean
13
Isaiah?
through 20.
No.
Yeah, what'd I say?
Isaiah.
Oh,
Anyway.
Isaiah? What do you say?
I thought you said Isaiah.
Hi,
So anyway.
Isaiah! That's what his friends would say. It was a big joke among all the exiles in Babylon.
The 420th episode. But
That's
anyway.
right. Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, I get it. No, I'm picking it up.
Da-da-da-da-da-da.
Bump. Okay. I'm back at that little ranch outside of Waco recording like I was a few episodes ago. So for those that are viewing this episode, that's why I look so rustic. But that's also why there's bright light behind me. And but if you're not listening, you're not watching, just listening, you can just imagine this rustic little cabin in which I sit. Jake is firmly ensconced in his office in Manhattan. Have you had to turn off the air conditioning for this episode?
Sure do. That's my dedication, though, to the listeners.
I want
and the
everybody
viewers.
to know. Yes, Jake has this little sad window unit in his office, and though the view
It
is
does
great,
the job.
overlooking Gramercy Park, he's just sweating. It's actually probably good you can't see him. He's taken off his shirt and he's put on a sweatband.
I mean, it is literally 420 degrees outside. It is so hot. I mean, it is.
Okay, we're gonna try to make it through this episode. All right, Isaiah.
So let's go to Isaiah 51, verses 1 through 6.
Let's do it. Listen to me, Isaiah begins, you that pursue righteousness, you that seek the Lord. So it's important to realize who's the you that he's talking to. And he's talking to the exiles from Jerusalem, the exiles who have been now living in Babylon for a while, like a generation has gone by. And this is 5th, 6th century BC. And what's about to happen is that Iran, much like in today's time, is going to be in the news because then it'll be called Persia, and the Persian Empire is on the rise. Cyrus is about to do a solid for the people of Israel. He's about to kick the Babylonians out of Jerusalem and make a way for the people of Israel to return back to their homeland. And so there's kind of a hinge point. There's some hope that's coming, and what you're reading about. So he's saying, look at me, you that pursue righteousness, you that seek the Lord. So these are folks that have been in exile for a long time. And if you've ever been stuck in a place that you want to get out of and you're finding that difficult, U2 sings about stuck in a place, stuck in a moment you can't get out of. And they've been stuck in a moment for decades here. And they want to get out of it. They want to get back home. They want to get back to their people. And they're feeling a little bit, God, what are you doing? If you've been stuck in a situation a relationship, a location, a job, emotional psychodynamic state, something that you feel stuck and you want somebody to break you out and get you free. That's what the people of Israel want. So Isaiah is saying, that moment is here, or it's just around the corner. And he says, look to the rock from which you were hewn, to the quarry from which you were dug. Look to Abraham, your father, and to Sarah, who bore you. So by saying that, Jake, what is he saying? Why is he comparing Abraham and Sarah, saying that that's the rock that you're a chip off the old block, basically, and the block that you've been chipped off of is Abraham and Sarah. What is that?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Gosh, that's very powerful, and it's an important section here because, as you said, this is directed towards people who are in exile. And so, in the midst of exile and in the midst of struggle, that very remember the rock from which you were hewn is a very powerful reminder that as God's people, we move forward in life, not by just moving on and getting over it, but by looking back to where God's has acted. And so Abraham tells them, look to Abraham, your father, and Sarah, who bore you. Israel's future hope begins by remembering God's past grace. And so who are Abraham and Sarah? Well, they're not impressive candidates. They were aging a barren couple. And God basically builds his kingdom through them, this nation through them, not by strength, but by promise. And so that is really the heartbeat of what that means, is that when your future feels totally uncertain, don't begin with your circumstances and don't begin by just moving on. Go back to the past where God has operated before. And what did he do? Well, he made a mighty nation out of Abraham and Sarah, but they also believed him that he would do it, and it was credited to them as righteous. So they're like, remember how you're saved, and it's not by what you do, it's by what you believe in. But I think about that in terms of my own life, big time. We're in the midst of restoring Calvary Church, and it is a bit of a struggle bus. And sometimes I get really anxious, but I move forward by remembering, we're still not closed, and what I mean, and God
Church isn't dead yet.
And I mean, there have been moments where it was dark and bleak. And you remember that, back in 2023, I shared with you, Aaron. I mean, it was tough with the fire alarm stuff and just seemed impossible. And God was faithful. So just in the midst of the struggle of the present, to look back and remember the rock you've been hewn from. And you belong to a family that believed God, and it was credited to them as righteous.
And if any listeners would like to give Calvary Church $20 million, I'm making that. I'm
you want to make
that right now.
The birthplace of AA, a pilgrimage site for the whole world. Give me a call.
And get an enormous tax deduction. Call Jacob Smith. All right. So, I think this thing of making a wilderness like Eden, making a desert like a garden, all these waste places, shout out to T.S. Eliot with Wasteland. I think this is just a theme throughout the scriptures. I mean, this is death and resurrection. This is not taking a healthy growing tomato plant in your garden and just adding a little miracle grow so the tomatoes get a little bit bigger and the plant gets a little taller. This is taking a desert. It's sort of cool. I'm reading this book, The Augustinian Pastor by Joseph Sherard. And
wow.
Review forthcoming in the Living Church magazine. Shout out to those folks if I can ever get it finished. But one of the great quotes in there is that when St. Augustine, it's all a book about St. Augustine, his conversion, his theology, and how it's he kind of is a mentor through the centuries to people in pastoral ministry today. But when he was converted, he was really struck by this image of monastic life, of Christian community. And at that time, all these monks were living in the deserts, and he called the deserts these fecund deserts. Now, this almost sounds like a bad word, but it's just a great word that people don't know because vocabularies are shrinking. But it basically means a fecund place is a fertile place, like it's growing. You could grow lots of plants there, as we've been talking about.
Where'd you go to college?
Yeah, I know. Harvard Upstairs Medical College and Air Conditioning Repair is a great school in Worcester, Mass. So the fecund desert, it's not supposed to be a fertile place. You're not supposed to get stuff growing in there. But again, this is where God brings new life when there is no life. He brings water to the scorched and dry places. And this is what he's saying. So this is not kind of they're there, that things are going to get better, things are going to get brighter. It's like acknowledging the reality of the death, acknowledging the reality of the barrenness, like Abraham and Sarah. Like, remember what you came from. You didn't come from people that were doing okay and they just got a few tips and tricks and got a lot better. These are people who had no hope and really not really much faith either. Sarah famously laughs at God when she learns that she's supposed to have this miracle child. She's way past menopause. Abraham, hears that he has this child or will have this child, and he believes it, but then he gets a plan B because he's not sure it's ever going to happen. So he appoints another guy, a member of his kind of servants, Eliezer of Damascus, to be his heir. So these folks are folks who had lost all hope, and yet God works with them. And there's a lot of people in your congregation that are sort of probably feeling a little hopeless about things. Not everybody, but almost everybody has something that's like a nut they can't crack, a knot they can't untie, a problem they can't solve. Like the nuns in The Sound of Music, how do you solve the problem, Maria? That's Jake's chair back again. Please hit more WD-40. But yeah, this is a story about God being able to do something that's impossible. And, final note on this, in the last few verses of this passage, we realize this isn't just for Israel. Just like we talked about last week, God has a global perspective. He doesn't just love the Steelers. He also loves the Jets, and he loves the Giants, and he loves the Jaguars. He doesn't pick teams. He loves everybody, and that goes for countries and nations and people too. And he says, "This teaching will go out from me, and justice for a light to the peoples." This is the goyim, the ethne in Greek, the goyim, and all the nations, not just the people of Israel. He talks about the coastlands wait for me, and for my arm they hope. Coastlands typically were famous for, that's Philistine territory, that's Canaanite territory, that's the Gentile folks, not the folks that were in the club, the Israelite club. So that global perspective here, this is good news for everybody, and obviously it gets fulfilled in Jesus. And when he says, "My salvation will be forever," he's talking about Jesus. Jake, what would you add or clarify there?
I would kind of conclude, I would look back to God's faithfulness. That would be a point that I would preach on from this text. And I would also talk about the importance of listening now for God's promise. And he comes, and then ultimately kind of, in the midst of all that, focus on what's going to last forever. We typically focus on the current moment, and we think that that's the thing that's going to define us our entire life. You know what I mean? The buildings, that's going to define me. I'm going to be the rector that's going to close this particular church, or this job is defining me. And the fact of the matter is he says the heavens will vanish like the smoke, but my salvation will be forever. And so Isaiah right here is contrasting two realities. The reality that your circumstances are simply temporary, but we tend to think that they're eternal. And that God's salvation, though, is eternal, which we tend to think is temporary. Right. And so everything we trust in eventually wears out. The economy, government, health, careers, even the stars themselves. I was talking to a very old pastor, a friend of mine who was a mentor when I first moved to New York City. And he's recently been diagnosed with cancer. And he said, I was talking to him, and he was like, "Man, this has really rocked my faith. It's rocked everything I built," because I had, I could talk and articulate the gospel, but my life has revolved so much around my present circumstance that when I'm actually faced with the reality that it's all going away, it will vanish like smoke, to quote the prophet. It really is starting to freak me out. And he was like, "I just need to be reminded of this, and I need to hear it over and over and over, and tell me, Jake, what's the one thing that endures?" And I was like, the gospel, God's covenant faithfulness, God's faithfulness to you in Jesus Christ. And that's what it ultimately looks at. We're not optimistic because of our present situation, but we're people of hope because God's salvation is forever.
Yeah. And, as you get this kind of a line with the Psalms, even though we don't normally talk about but if you go to Psalm 138 for this day, though the Lord be high, that's not a 420 joke. Though the Lord be high, he cares for the lowly. Don't even laugh, Jake. It's like the Lord is high
I already
up.
did.
Yeah, I know, it's over. It's like he cares for the lowly. And this is grace for the sinner. This is grace for the person who has the cancer diagnosis. This is a grace for the person who feels lost and abandoned. This is not, God's not just kind of loving the people who are getting it done and things are going right for them, but the lowly. So, let's turn to Romans 12, verses through 8. I appeal to you, therefore, bros and sisses, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you can discern what is the will of God, good, acceptable, and perfect. And then he talks about not thinking of yourself more highly than you ought, and one body, many members. We're one body in Christ, and we all have these different ministries. And he ends with a long list of kind of ministries or gifts. But Jake, are you a living sacrifice? Is that, you're training for a marathon. You're getting up early and beating your body and making it your slave and running these long distances through the lonely, dark streets of Manhattan in the early morning. Is that what this is about?
Yes. That's not what it's about, although it could be maybe, because I'm running for my neighbors. I'm running for a wonderful organization called Hope for New York. And if you'd like to give me money for that too. No, I'm just kidding.
We're just using it. We got this platform, might as well use it. You know what I'm saying? Let's monetize this.
Just kidding. But anyway, I think, that we are living sacrifices, absolutely. But as we look at this, we need to make the distinction between being a living sacrifice and an atoning sacrifice. When you look at verse 1 right here, a more accurate Greek translation is in view of the mercies of God.
Yeah.
Everything we do is the result of everything that Paul has talked about in Romans chapter 1 through 11. It's the result of being a mercied person. You're a saved person. You're a justified person. He's not saying make yourself holy, but because you've been mercied, you can live your life as a living sacrifice. And that's the important thing. And so many Christians mess this up in their preaching. They confuse atoning sacrifice with living sacrifice. A living sacrifice is one who loves their neighbor as they have been loved. Loving our neighbor expresses ultimately our love for God. So this is what we think. And so therefore, this being a living sacrifice, it's kind of like, what's his name? He designed Falling Water and the Guggenheim.
Frank Lloyd Wright.
Frank Lloyd Wright. He once said something very, very interesting, and I heard about it once again because my wife and I went to the Guggenheim. But flex. But anyway, the point is that he said that architecture should be done from the inside out, not the outside in. And that's the problem. Most people are doing theology from the outside in. What you do defines you. But rather, this theology, being a living sacrifice, understands yourself to be something being worked on from the inside out. And therefore, if it's on the inside out, it's no longer transactional. The way we think about life is give to get, you know what I mean? Get to give, all of that stuff. But the renewal of your mind that Paul begins to talk about in light of being a living sacrifice is that so you can totally give yourself to your neighbor without anything in return. In light of everything God has done for you. This transforms the way we see ourselves now from the inside out. It's very, very powerful, I think, those first two verses.
Yeah. And it centers the Christian life as one that is it's rooted in something internal, as you said, from the inside out. This is spiritual worship. Paul came from a tradition, in the Jewish tradition, where sacrifices were not these metaphorical living sacrifices. You actually killed an animal. And the same for the Greco-Roman culture. Those temples to Athena and Zeus and all that, like they were killing animals. This is how God's worked, by presenting an animal that you killed. And the greater the value of the animal, the greater the value of the sacrifice and all that. And this is saying, don't do that. We're talking about spiritual worship, not actual, because Jesus has completed the offering. The only atoning sacrifice that ever needed to be made with flesh and blood, Jesus Christ has made, and that's over. So we continue that by being living sacrifices, which is this interesting, odd, kind of head-scratching, but also beautiful idea. Like we are, as a living sacrifice, we are by definition not dying because we're alive, yet we're sort of giving up ourselves And by doing so, we're finding what we're giving up is that ego-centered, law-based, fear-based, gotta earn, gotta hustle, gotta perform. Like you said, give to get. That's what we're sacrificing and giving up. That whole human project. And he says to be transformed by the renewing of your minds, which doesn't mean. Sometimes people think it means like I'm only going to think thoughts about Jesus around. No, what it means is you're being transformed from having a mind that is always judging yourself, judging others, operating in the universe of the law, always being self-critical, always being critical of others, always evaluating. And this is the normal default thing of the human mind. And he says your mind will be transformed and will be renewed, and you'll see that the will of God, the good, acceptable, and perfect will of God, is this thing of giving mercy and a world that's not based on fear but on love, not on judgment but on forgiveness, not on earning but on mercy.
And on grace, too. I mean, I love like verses 3 and 6. For by the grace given to me, I say everyone among you not to think of yourself more highly than you ought. And then he goes on and he lists a series of gifts. And he says, we have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us. I mean, that's really, really important. From beginning to end, it's all about grace. What Paul is saying here is that everyone has different gifts. What is not okay is to think that your gifts are inferior or that someone else's gifts are inferior to your own. What Paul is doing is saying that even as an apostle, it's the same class with all other members of the church. I think even within our tradition, there can be this clericalism that develops, and that's wrong. And so what he's saying is that all of this is from an awareness of God's grace, and all of this is for the building up of the church.
Yeah, and it's great that we have different gifts, different members, different parts of the body. It's not something that's a bug in the system. It's a feature, obviously. I think there's also something, as Paul says, by the grace given to me, I say everyone among you not to think of yourself more highly than you ought to think. If you're thinking of yourself more highly than you ought to think, that is a sign of insecurity. That's sort of that vain puffing up, like I'm better. You know, it's like Willie Loman in Arthur Miller's Death of the Salesman, who calls his life is a joke, his career is a shambles, his family is crumbling, and based on a bunch of deception and all that. And he always goes around saying, I'm very well thought of. Like he just thinks of himself way more highly than he ought. And it all comes from insecurity. And we all know people like that, and we probably have been guilty of it ourselves, trying to puff ourselves up and feel better of ourselves and thinking, you know, the second you begin to think, well, I haven't advanced as far as I want. I'm not doing as well as these other people. I had a moment the other day where a friend was telling me about a guy who went to college that with us that has like this amazing estate on Long Island. And I was like David Byrne, where is my beautiful house? Where is my estate on Long Island? But the second I think that, like my mind's like, well, but look at these other people you're doing better than. Like that whole thing of comparison and evaluation and judgment, that's kind of living in the law. And what the grace that we have, knowing that we're fully loved and accepted and that God is delighted with us, he's imputed this righteousness to us through the atoning sacrifice of Christ, knowing all of that, that's what allows us to not have to delude ourselves with these, as they call them, delusions of grandeur. Like we don't have to puff ourselves up. We can actually be like the people in the church basement with the bad coffee saying, I'm Steve and I'm an alcoholic, or whatever. You can, or as we say in our confession, like we confess that we have sinned against you in thought, word, and deed, about what we've done and left undone. We can be honest about what's actually going on in our lives. We can say, I'm sorry. We can live in the place of reality. And that's what he's inviting people to, that because of the grace, if you are loved and not afraid of judgment, then you'd actually say, hey, I have a problem and I need help. It's when you're scared of judgment and you're not under grace where you begin to kind of construct this big facade of your life. And so it's a beautiful implication of the freedom that we have, that you can actually say what's going on because of the gospel. So I think that's it. And we'll move now to Matthew 16, 13 through 20. Jesus is coming into Caesarea Philippi. Don't confuse it with Caesarea Maritima, totally different Caesarea. But he's in this place in northern Israel.
All these people like, oh, thank you. I've been waiting for 20 minutes for that to be clarified.
France. I know.
I just wanted to be that clarified. So anyway, thank you, Aaron. That was awesome.
No problem.
I was wondering.
I'm here to help. I do what I can. I live to serve. So he asked his disciple. The important thing about Caesarea Philippi, Jake, you've been there, and I've been there. It's this. There's a There's a famous shrine there at the headwaters of the Jordan River, and there was a shrine to Zeus and Pan and all that sort of stuff. It's sort of a more Gentile-ish area. And in that setting of all these different gods, Jesus says, "Who do you say the Son of Man is?" And there's a pop quiz, and some of the disciples say, well, some people say that he's the John the Baptist, some Elijah, some Jeremiah, some the prophets. And then Jesus' question, this is the preacher's question, but who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter beautifully answers, "You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Blessed are you," Jesus says, "Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, the rock, and on this rock I will build my church." By the way, that's the thematic link between the Old Testament verse and the New Testament passage here, where we have consider the rock from which you were hewn. Well, here we have Peter, this rock on whom God will build his church. So the gates of hell will not prevail against the church, and talks about binding and loosing and all that. And then he tells everybody, don't tell anyone that I'm the Messiah. Keep NDA, how Jesus ends here. So, which is extremely ineffective because the word keeps getting out. Jake, famous passage. There is sort of the way that we're supposed to preach this. We're supposed to preach this kind of a "who do you say that I am?" and like really trying to get the congregation to like say Jesus is the Messiah and have this, come to Jesus moment, which is a great way to preach it. How do you preach this? Were there other angles you would take? How do you come at this passage in Caesarea?
Kind of a fresh thing. Well, there's two kind of fresh things that I would talk about. I would talk about maybe, because we have been there, and there is like this giant wall, and there's all these nooks and notches in it that
it's like carved into a rock. It's like a cave.
Used to contain all sorts of idols, and actually the gate of Hades, one of the gates of Hades, was actually located there, and so they believed into the Hades. And to remember that the gates of Hades is not the gates of like hell will not prevail. Actually, gates are a defensive weapon. And so it is like basically this proclamation that you are the Son of the living God, contrasted with all these dead statues. You are the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the living God, is the powerful word that has the power, like not even the gates of hell can protect themselves against that. But I have been reflecting on this, and somebody a couple of years ago gave me a poster of the altarpiece in St. Mary's Chapel, I believe, in Wittenberg, and it has the altarpiece is interesting because instead of like the Virgin Mary and like tons of angels, it has like Luther and the various reformers doing different things. Melanchthon's baptizing someone, Luther's giving, like sitting at a table with Jesus, and Jesus giving all these ordinary folks communion. And then there's Bugenheim, that was, I think that's his name, that was Luther's pastor, and he's holding keys.
He's doing
and
like Romanian deadlifts, right? No?
Well, he's like holding these giant keys. And so what does that mean? Well, Jesus wasn't making Peter the Pope here, as someone claim. Rather, when he's given the keys carry, the point of keys is that they carry a sense of authority. And this is how I would go. I mean, I have a whole set of keys. And there's only one person who has more keys than I do in this place, and that's the music director, which drives me crazy. But anyway, but I can get into every nook and I can get into every cranny because I have the authority to go into these places as the rector. When Jesus says, "I give you the keys," this isn't decorative abstraction. These two keys are the two words that we talk about Sunday after Sunday. And we talk about on this podcast over and over, and that define Mockingbird. And that is the proper distinction between the law and the gospel. The law binds and constrains, and the gospel brings life and freedom. And what Jesus is doing here is he's giving Peter, the confessing disciple, the authority of Jesus himself. And with that confession in his heart and upon his lips, Peter and all the apostles and every preacher has the authority to bind the devil and humanity's sins, and with the word of the gospel set people free from sin and death once and for all. And so I would talk about maybe this time around kind of keeping it fresh. Cling to those keys. Cling to those words. Law and gospel, because when those words, law and gospel, are distinguished, our confession is clear and the essence of our faith becomes tangible, and Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, becomes actually magnified.
Yeah, and that's a great angle to go. I think if you're looking for a different fresh angle, and this is not to one-up Jake, or this is not a competition, as we said, we all have the gospel.
No, there's multiple fresh angles. I've got one to one-up you.
Yeah, I can't wait for it. Yeah, we'll one up all day long. Yeah, so where Jesus asks, it's always great how Jesus teaches by asking questions. So he begins, who do people say that the Son of Man is? And there's different kinds of answers. People say John the Baptist, which is the hot new preacher in Galilee. Some people say he's Elijah, so they're going back to kind of the old school, Jeremiah, another old school. And so basically there's always, when people are looking for God to act, they're often looking for, like, we got to go back to tradition, Fiddler on the Roof. Or there are people who say we got to get the hot new thing. So we got to go back to ancient liturgies. And some people say, no, we got to do, seeker-friendly church, and we got to have, like, the lasers and whatever, the old and the new. And what we see here is that both impulses kind of miss the mark. The hottest new self-help teaching, the latest trend in therapy, or going back to be a trad cath, trad wife, trad guy, whatever. Both these impulses are looking at secondary things. And Jesus says, who do you say that I am? And the key thing here is Peter says, you're the Messiah, the anointed one. Is that what that means? The Son of the living God. So not what things were happening in the past, or what's like really cool, kind of futuristic, but like the living God who contains the past, who contains the future, who contains the present. Basically the one who's here right now. And I think that's just kind of an illustrative thing, because we're always sort of looking for the next new thing or going back to the old thing, and that'll fix it. But the thing is, when you go back to the old things, those times were just as messed up as our times. Like, if you want to, go back to the good old days, time travel to 1825, and you'll find people that are just as sinful. Time travel to 1625 or 1225. You'll find people that are sinful, terrible, narcissistic, base, crass, crude, human beings. So all that to say is we need the Messiah, the Son of the living God, the one who can do for us what we can't do for ourselves. And by the way, Simon, son of Jonah, it's important to realize, I wouldn't hype up Peter too much in this passage. And this is why, if you make too much of a deal about Peter being the rock, et cetera, like Peter is about to fall flat on his face in the very next verse. And you're going to read it next Sunday, where Jesus begins to talk about his death, and Peter's like, no, you're not going to die. You're not here to be an atoning sacrifice for us. You're here to rule and make us put us in your cabinet and all that. And so Peter does get that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God, but even here, he doesn't even understand what that means. And so his understanding is by grace. And it is not Peter himself that's the special person here. The rock on which the church is built is this proclamation that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God, that one can save. Because Peter's going to find out real quick he needs that saving immediately. And so I think it's just it's important to kind of note that. So that's one thing that I would kind of talk about. Jake,
great. I think we've covered it all. And so, this is a wonderful thing. One of the reasons why Protestants never had a giant mitre with a bunch of keys all around it as the symbol of Peter, but we used a rooster holding two keys in his hand, and so in its talon. Yeah. So the rooster. So anyway, and
that's not an Alice in Chains reference. It's important to note. The rooster is obviously the rooster that crowed when Peter denied Christ 3 times as he was being arrested. And so the symbol of Peter is not somebody who was awesome, but somebody who failed thrice. Even though he said, I'll never let you down, Jesus, but he absolutely did. And if you go to that spot, obviously, Jake, you and I have been there as well. There's a church there, and the little weather vane on top of the church, it's not a cross, it's not a symbol of keys.
That's where we got it.
It's a rooster. Yep. So it's a great Christian symbol of somebody who can fail and still be loved by God, a.k.a. St. Peter and Jake and me.
There it is. So there it is.
420. I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, man.
There it is.
Well,
well done. And we'll
will go from there.
421
All right.
next week.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Same Old Song. Hope you found some gospel nuggets for the pulpit or for your life. If you like what you heard, leave a review or rating in Apple Podcasts. Dave Zoll will be sad if you don't. Thanks to TJ Hester for audio production.
And remember to keep that Bible by your bedside, ready to rock and roll.
Please tell me